Good afternoon here in Nijmegen and also those joining us online. My name is Sander Jan. I'm assistant professor at Radboud University and co-leading this project together with Birka Wikke. Welcome to our hybrid session where we discuss high integrity voluntary climate action as we prepare for COP29 and beyond. This year also marks the 10 years anniversary of the 2014 UN Climate Summit, which could be considered the beginning of large-scale mobilization of voluntary climate action around the UNFCCC. And this mobilization continues until today. We still need climate action at a superlative scale, but that action also needs to be credible and high integrity. This event is a first by the Achieve project, and I will hand over to Birka, professor here at Radboud University, to introduce this project.
Thanks, Sander. So also a warm welcome from my side, especially the people here in the room, but of course also online. Really happy to see so many people joining us today. I would like to briefly introduce the Achieve project for all the new people that are joining us. Achieve is a 4-year research project funded by the European Union that aims at identifying opportunities to strengthen and scale up high integrity voluntary climate action so that it can contribute to net zero emissions by mid-century. And to do that, we have 12 Achieve partners from Europe and beyond, many of them represented here in the room, and the rest is online, who are working together on multiple topics around high integrity voluntary climate action. And these topics are mapping the current state of voluntary climate action, assessing its integrity, and they are specifically looking at individual action by non-state actors, looking at cooperative initiatives and also the carbon markets. We investigate the role of regulation and governance in achieving high integrity and strengthening the integrity of voluntary climate action. And we want to better understand the interactions between different voluntary climate actions by non-state actors, but also between state and non-state actors. And so together we hope to contribute to scaling up voluntary climate action that has high integrity. And as you can see from these topics, the project has a very strong interdisciplinary character. So we are bringing together social and natural scientists to work on these issues. But Achieve is also characterized by a commitment to co-creating results with stakeholders from all kinds of fields. And we also want to produce timely outputs that can actually influence or be used by decision makers about the future role and integrity of voluntary climate action. And so today's session is the first step towards achieving our project goals, but also going beyond that. So I very much look forward to the reflections and the insights from the panel today.
Thank you, Birka. And I will shortly present our excellent speakers today, but I want to note that if you join us online, I would like to invite you to also take part in the discussion. The chat is open for you to make comments and to pose questions. Without further ado, let me welcome Ian Tout and Tamaki Takao for joining us. Ian and Tamaki are program officers at UN Climate Change. Among other things, you are also leading the development of UNFCCC's Global Climate Action Portal. Ian, Tama, we have seen a growing emphasis on high integrity and climate action. For instance, a couple of years ago, we have seen the UN high-level expert group on net zero commitments publishing their recommendations. But more recently, we have also seen the publication of the recognition and accountability framework to ensure greater accountability among voluntary initiatives. And now COP29 is upcoming in Azerbaijan. What needs to happen between now and November to institutionalize high integrity voluntary climate action?
Yeah, thank you very much, Sander, and yeah, it's a pleasure to join you today, and yeah, and to be here and to appreciate you kind of having this discussion. And I think it's, you know, you mentioned before 10 years since 2014, and good now to be talking about the, you know, increasing the integrity of the voluntary action, not just mobilizing more and more volume. Yeah, perhaps we kind of had a presentation prepared, so I was wondering what I'm sorry to kind of come with a procedural question, but I was just checking how we are going to proceed with the session, because I mean I think we have a number of things which will be addressed through our presentation. I don't necessarily want to jump in, or is this a discussion and we'll then be able to just draw from the what we were planning to present?
You should be able to share your slides, I think, and let us know if that doesn't work.
No, I think that should work fine. So perhaps I'll, yeah, Tamara is just going to pull up the slides and we'll take us through them. I hope this will help address, you know, your questions and kind of give a bit of an update of where we are, and then happy for kind of a discussion following that if there's any questions you might have. So then I pass to Maki. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Professor Sander, very much, and yeah, thanks Ian for passing. So yeah, as you said, yeah, what needs to happen to institutionalize those voluntary climate actions? You know, I think sure, there's lots of things we can discuss on, but yeah. Let me just, and as you also, mentioned, yes, it's the 10th year since 2014 when, the Lima Paris Action Agenda and launch of GCAP happened. So, yeah, as Ian pointed out, we do have a set of, slides that we would like to go quickly go through, and hope that it will give some, thoughts around for further discussion from our side. So, yeah. And yeah, by the way, a quick introduction for myself, but yeah, Tamaki Takao also working with Ian Tout. I think, Ian is well known within, all of the colleagues around there, but yeah, also started working within this team on, GCAP and all these, around tracking through the secretary. So great to be in touch. So yeah, without that, let me just perhaps first, First, let us just, do a quick start with perhaps like a recap of, COP28. So kind of a quick overview, but yeah. So held in Dubai, as you might have heard, it was kind of like, with around 85,000 participants. It was, kind of seen as one of the biggest of this kind. If you've been in Dubai, scale was, I think, honestly or personally, it was massive for sure. And there was, lots of, agenda items, across the convention protocol, the Paris Agreement itself. But for sure, one of the main topic, perhaps the major highlight could be said as the conclusion of the first global stocktake. So yeah, as you might all know, and this also I think very much relates to all these ambition cycle and collaboration with all sectors or actors. But yeah. So it's stipulated under the Article 14 of the Paris Agreement, and one of the key pillars of the ratchet mechanism itself of the agreement. So, and just to again recap, but the first cycle started after the COP26 in Glasgow, and we had this throughout the 2 years. We had those information collection, technical dialogues. For some of you have been participating or not, and the final negotiations in Dubai. And so, parties agreed on the outcomes with, highlighting several gaps, and also agreed to accelerate several actions across, the themes and systems towards 2030. And one of them was the transition away from fossil fuels, a call to that. And of course, there was also, other, agreements like on the loss and damage issues, and also on global goal and adaptation and stuff. But on the climate action side, so there was also around over 40 events around, under the so-called global climate action agenda, or in other words, the set of events, led under the leadership of the high-level champions and the Marrakesh Partnership. So, yeah, they stakeholders. There was like lots of discussions, by actors on implementation across those climate systems. And as you know, recent COP, where we've been seeing that there's this expanding of recent COPs, and more and more climate actions movements are happening throughout the venue, not only within the negotiation rooms, but also, in these kinds of events, pavilion rooms, or even elsewhere, perhaps in the corridors or stuff. And, capturing these action moments at COPs, and we think that it will enable stakeholders and also the wider public to kind of like understand the climate action momentum, and also kind of to follow up on the progress of the announcements made. So with that, we, throughout the Global Climate Action Portal, we have, tracked, gathered these kind of informations on announcements and pledges, new initiative launches, and those updates, and through working with, partners, stakeholders, and also by calling for submissions throughout the 2 weeks. And yeah, the portal now kind of stores around 190 announcements made at COP28. And, this kind of information kind of fed into one of our summary documents of the Global Climate Action Agenda, jointly built, drafted by the Secretariat, champions, and the COP28 presidency. So yeah, that was kind of the quick overview of COP28 last year in December. And then, what's going on in terms of what's going on this year. So as you all know, this year's COP is going to be held in Azerbaijan in November. And on the one end, yes, in COP28, GST, I would say, was kind of large, but finance could be said as one of the critical, large issues in COP29. And, this, so-called new collective quantified goal on finance. So parties agreed to set a new finance goal from a floor of $100 billion per year for after 2025. And this is expected to reach, some kind of agreement in COP29. So, and at the same time, the operation of, we could say that this ambitious cycle is now at play with the first global stocktake outcome concluded. And as you know, parties are now required to update their national ambition pledges, so the NDCs, by early 2025, and taking into account the GST outcomes. So with this, NDCs and GST cycle is very important. Secretariat, as a secretariat-wide, we're kind of supporting this updates. For example, during the SB, there was like launch of the NDC 3.0 Navigator, which is kind of like a platform that provides opportunities to raise ambition. And also one of the another cycle within this ambition is the ratchet mechanism is the transparency side. And as you may all know, the enhanced transparency framework has been already established and in play. All countries are required to submit biannual transparency reports, and that'll include those inventories and progress towards NDCs. And the countries are required to submit by the end of the first BTRs by end of this year. And it seems already, some countries like Andorra, Guinea, or Panama has kind of like given submissions, which is really great to see. So these are kind of the overview of the CCC process in this year. But of course, alongside climate action by all stakeholders is kind of like one of the keys to kind of make these kind of agreements, more ambitious, and also to implement all of these, frameworks or agreements that's been made. And so also as you may also know, high-level champions has been working since the adoptions of the Paris Agreement in 2015, and the Marrakesh Partnership for sure has been the key platform on the, the leadership of the champions for multi-stakeholder collaboration, and also, to enhance the collaboration between parties and non-party stakeholders or non-state actors. And yeah, the COP29 high-level champions has been recently appointed, and she is currently working with the acting COP28 high-level champions, Ms. Razan, and they have, their priorities are kind of listed under the recently published annual work program of the high-level champions and the Marrakesh Partnership. We can't go into the details of this, but yeah, just on the key kind of priority pillars is that they're gonna focus on accelerating, just transition away from fossil fuels, protect and restore nature, and also kind of equitable finance to climate solutions. And yeah, of course, the Secretariat is, also working, on this, climate action agenda piece in our team in this term. Yeah, would like to also reiterate that, this Global Climate Action Portal, or NASCA, which again, yeah, you may all know, is kind of like one of our key tools. And yeah, just repeating, but yes, it will, it was launched in 2014 and will mark its 10th anniversary this year. So let me, with these kind of like couple slides, since I went through this couple slides overview, let me just go in deep a bit more into, to GCAP, how it's going right now. So yeah, just again, it was, in 2014, it was launched as NASCA, and yes, it did kind of like seem to help a certain, building towards momentum towards the adoption of the Paris Agreement at that time between 2014, so COP20 and COP21. And it was also kind of recognized by parties at COP21 as part of the adoption of the Paris Agreement. So yeah, ever since its launch, the GCAP has continued the growth in both quantity and quality through, and we had, had some couple of improvements or relaunches. Like for example, at COP26, GCAP, we had this relaunch with including some, process metrics and those tracking framework with, stakeholders and experts. I think, some of them are on the conference room right now there. But yeah, so and we've been, continuously operating this online platform. Just a quick, this graph is just a quick, overview of some implications on GCAP. The left side shows how many actors that was recognized at, at 2014, around that time of when we've launched, and how many actors we recognize right now in 2024. So yeah, very roughly, it's around 60 times. So yeah, this is, of course, done with the work with, partners, data providers, and stakeholders. Yeah, and, since with these kind of, work on, improving the data management or data capture, this increase was, of course, achieved. But at the same time, this does also could be said that, this also kind of indicates a growing momentum itself by actors taking climate action. So with that, the current structure or landscape of GCAP is kind of like shown in this quick diagram. And yeah, we do have mainly three components: actor tracking, corporate initiative, climate initiative tracking, and on event tracking. Yeah, so on the event tracking is what I kind of mentioned before about what we did during COP28. So actor tracking is where you can find climate commitments and actions of individual actors in such as companies and subnational governments, and data on emissions and targets comes mainly from the CDP disclosure. On the second side, corporate climate initiative tracking, or CCI in an abbreviated term. CCI tracking, this is another key component, and we track the coordinated efforts institutionalized, but not as a standalone legal entity. And of course, as you may know, CCI takes several forms, and and their focus can also vary, not only on mitigation, but also there's lots of like adaptation initiatives or, initiatives that are working on both sides. And on GCAP, CCI usually should have the clearly stated climate-related goal aligned with the Paris Agreement. It has a mechanism for monitoring and reporting progress towards that goal. It should take a multi-stakeholder approach since it's a cooperative initiative and to achieving its climate-related goal. And of course, since we're tracking this, stuff, it needs to have like a public contact point or secretariat or at least or something like that. And so we, the secretary, track the progress of CCI directly engaging with the focal points. And yes, I think my PC went out of battery. As apologies for that. Let us continue our slide with kindly asking, sorry, and if you could.
No problem. Yeah. Or did we want to take the opportunity for any questions? I think that was
good idea.
Yeah.
Maybe a good hopefully overview where we are and where we've been and where we're at. But perhaps it might be there's some good slides on the developments we're doing in GCAP. But maybe an opportunity, Sander, to come back to you for any clarifications or questions.
So we are in a room with a lot of analysts and researchers, and many of us you probably have seen before. And this ties in maybe also with new developments with GCAP, for instance. Like, what can we do, like as an Achieve project or as a data and analysis community, to support your work and support kind of greater transparency, credibility, integrity of climate action?
Yeah, thanks, Professor, for that question. And that's, we've kind of like been in, in discussion or talks on this, but very much important is what I can say. And like simply, as then you may all know, GCAP is this online platform, using these kind of components to, showcase to the public, and also have like some set of, common filterings and stuff to kind at least make some set of implication or indication on, comparison within, I would say, for example, between actors or between initiatives, again, like in terms of their focus or geographical area and etc. So yeah, we do have, we offer is kind of this kind of platform. And I can, what we can say is that, yes, in terms of, with the research side, it'll be first, of course, more than grateful that, there's lots of, researchers, across the natural science, social science that is, having, interest and, can make this, can make use of this, set of, information platform. So we'll be, excited and grateful to see, how best, you could, make use of this data set, data platform, and into your analysis, whether it's, natural science or, policy or, other social science and stuff. And at the same time, in that terms, we'll be more than, happy to hear, how it was useful, where it was perhaps then not useful, or, how we could make it more, useful for your research topics and stuff. But Ian, if you have,
Thanks, Tamino. I think that any strengthening of the connections between the analysis you're doing and the the data we're gathering would be useful and can hopefully help both of us kind of amplify our messages where we have a lot of data and information. And as Tamino said again, it would be good to know what's the useful information, what's the information you need for your analysis. How can we be useful to you? We don't have all the capacities or tools to do the necessary analysis, and indeed maybe it's not always, and better or worse, it's not our place to be calling people out or to be necessarily doing that. But then maybe you can, on your side, that your messages can be amplified by speaking to the information that we're collecting, and that information, which is, that there's a bigger awareness of from parties, maybe that, that GCAP, NASCA is a tool which is a platform recognized in the process kind of thing. So it can maybe be leveraged, as I say, in amplifying those messages. You mentioned the RAF, the recognition and accountability framework. I mean, I think that's kind of an item we can't really speak much on, because I think that the executive secretary is in the process at the moment of looking at the recommendations from the consultation period, but will be proposing an implementation plan as to how to take that forward. Now, we can't speak to what's going to be in that plan because that's really under discussion at the moment. But when that does come out, I think it will require, again, collaboration and support. So I think we welcome your engagement in the implementation of the RAF when that happens.
Absolutely, and thank you very much for and it is indeed our aim to not only conduct a research project, but also make sure that we do that alongside the work you are doing, right? So what we are also discussing in the next 2 days is, among other things, what can we provide in terms of analysis and recommendations by COP29, and we will give a report on that, share a report on that with you, and also discuss that with you. So rest assured that we will be in touch. But maybe we can invite Thomas Hill into the call. Thomas Hill is Professor of Global Public Policy at the Blavatnik School of Government and co-director of the Oxford Martin Programme on Net Zero Regulation and Policy. He's also an expert group member of the UN Task Force on Net Zero Policy, which will report on current and emerging policy responses on net zero at COP29. Tom, great having you here. Thank you for joining. There's a growing concern over the integrity of voluntary climate action, and to no small degree that is due to concerns about the rapid growth of net zero commitments. What opportunities do you see to support high integrity of net zero commitments as we go into COP29?
Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yeah, we do hear you.
I'm trying to share my screen, but it doesn't seem to be working, I'm afraid. Is there some sort of setting that needs to be enabled for that, or?
We're looking at it right now.
Can you see my screen?
No, not yet.
Sorry about this.
Otherwise, maybe one, Kiri, maybe you can drop your email in the chat, and Tom, if you want to share your slides through emails, then we can try to do it like that.
Great. I think it might need to restart. I just got an error message from Teams.
Okay.
Where's that? Should I send it to you over email? Is that best?
Yeah, yeah. And meanwhile, maybe you can just try to share your thoughts. As we try to put on the slides.
Great. Just give me a moment to send this email, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Tom, maybe what we can also do is that we first move on to Luli, and then we try to sort this out with the slides. Is that okay?
As you prefer. Happy to follow your lead, Simon.
Okay. In that case, we will come back to you. then maybe I can introduce Ludi. Ludi Pesquera is a Senior Climate Action Coordinator at WWF and also a partner in the Achieve project. She has been overseeing the development of the Alliance for Climate Action in Mexico, which is one of the alliances for climate action, a worldwide network of national alliances that aim to drive ambitious action by all types of actors and to create broad support for climate action. Ludi, the alliances for climate action demonstrate the great diversity and leadership and support for climate action, but what is the role of ACA in promoting high integrity?
Thank you very much, Sander, for the introduction. And thanks everyone for having me virtually, in addition to my colleague Jonathan, who's in the room. So yes, I also prepared some slides to address your question. And first, I will start by introducing a bit about what climate action alliances are and how we are engaging with the idea of integrity in voluntary climate action. So alliances for climate action are basically a coalition of non-state actors that was created since 2017 by WWF, convened by WWF, and it was inspired by the coalition that was formed in 2017 when President Trump announced that he was pulling back from, or that the US was pulling back from the Paris Agreement, and a number of subnational governments, companies, and other entities basically make a public declaration around how they were still in the Paris Agreement and how they would continue to advance on their own commitment. So there's different type of actors that participate in ACAs currently, and we have 3 focus areas on our work that basically include advocacy, public engagement, and climate action. Why do we convene ACAs further beyond the US after that? Because we observed that this was not only true in the US, but that there were other contexts and countries, particularly in the global south, where non-state actors were working isolated and dispersely in climate action, not really connecting with the requirements of the national agendas, the NDCs, and the commitments in the Paris Agreement, and also that non-state actors had a very little capacity to engage and influence policy. So after that, we started working in different countries to convene such alliances, and currently we have 10 active alliances, mostly in the global south, and some upcoming alliances forming in Colombia, Kenya, and the Philippines. While these alliances follow the same theory of change and work on the same 3 pillars, each alliance responds to the necessities of the particular political context and social context where it is formed. But also I would say that alliances have evolved and been shaped depending also on what governments are active. You can think of the alliance in Brazil, the alliance in the US, and how, the government changes in these past 8 years have really required the focus of non-state actors, of leading non-state actors, to have a common voice and to work in different ways depending on whether the country has a pro-climate government or an anti-climate government. A little bit of institutional context just to show how this came about and connecting to the presentation that was made before mine. I think the non-state actor agenda has been strengthened in the last years throughout the different COPs. It was in COP29 when the first climate action agenda for non-state actors was drafted with a duration of 5 years. This evolved into the Marrakesh Partnership, and then years later, the Marrakesh Partnership has been strengthened and continued to become relevant. And basically how we are engaged in this process is that the Alliances for Climate Action have been recognized or were recognized in the new version of the Marrakesh Partnership as a tool for implementing the Marrakesh Partnership. And also we have been recognized as accelerators of Race to Zero and Race to Resilience. And this means that we motivate and facilitate for members in our countries to engage and to participate in Race to Zero. And we sort of ensure that we can bring down the plans of the Marrakesh Partnership into different contexts. And the latest development in COP28 was this increased recognition of the subnational governments through the Champ Declaration. Give me a sec. So our membership is very different and in different countries. Where you can see here more or less there are some alliances that are smaller. The alliance in the US, for instance, is a network of networks and it has a very extensive membership. And some alliances are more private sector focused, and some alliances are more city focused, and this depends, as I said, on what the political context is and the climate action context is. And we try to have, we aim to have always 10% of our signatories be part of Race to Zero and to increase that number always. So Sander and Birka asked me to share a little bit about how we promote high integrity voluntary climate action in these different contexts. And I selected 3 cases that I know best and that are different also, and that can shed light on the different contexts that we operate. So first is an example from Japan Climate Initiative. This alliance has over 800 members. It has a heavy focus on the private sector, and it has been very successful in presenting a common narrative towards the national government. And this year, for instance, I think integrity goes in different ways. That's what I want to show with this case, in the sense that most of JCI clients members have targets set through SBTI or are members to Race to Zero. The Japan Climate Initiative is also a partner of Race to Zero. And so when companies set targets, part of being able to have integrity in their targets is to be able to fulfill them. But if there are no conditions in the country, for instance, in this case, to buy renewable energy, how can companies meet their targets and have integrity in their targets if the political context or the institutional context does not allow them to advance on their own targets? So joined together, part of this community of businesses made this a sort of plea to the Japanese government together with RE100 to make sure that the conditions are in place so that there's more renewable energy in the country. And this is an example of how the Alliances for Climate Action engages in advocacy actions to ensure that the context allows also the members to fulfill these different commitments that they may have. And this is focused mostly on the private sector, but others might focus, for instance, on cities or on different groups of actors. The second case that I want to share is this case from the Mexican Alliance for Climate Action. And here we noticed that we needed to start like 5 steps back, and how we were going to have a common understanding of what net zero commitments means was by providing capacities for members to analyze whether they were subject to making net zero commitments, and having drafted this like decision tree where they can make sure if they are ready to make net zero commitments. but also the discussion about net zero emissions and integrity and voluntary climate action is very behind in this context compared to other countries. So part of our activities involve training our members to become spokespersons for net zero emissions and for initiatives such as Race to Zero or science-based targets or the city's Race to Zero, to engage in those initiatives and trying to also ensure that the public is supportive of these ideas. So this is more kind of a public engagement activity. And what I want to show here is that, you know, not in all countries, the integrity debate is as it is in Europe. It might be shaped differently, it might be approached differently or understood differently. And I see that part of our role is to make sure that we have a more cohesive and coherent understanding of what integrity means in the context of voluntary climate action. And the last case that I want to show is the youngest alliance in the United Arab Emirates that was launched 2 years ago, and then only 1 year later, and following these demands in COP28 of increased transparency, accountability, the alliance here has developed an interactive, first one of its kind dashboard where you can follow, well, everyone can follow, and it's open to the public, to see how members of the alliance are measuring against the progress, their own progress, their country's progress, how they are, and also demonstrating their progress beyond, before and beyond SBTI, not only focusing on the process of establishing a goal, but as we know, this is a journey. And what we've seen is that a lot of the mechanisms that exist today only captured certain milestones, right? So what the EU ACA wants to show here is the journey and how members are measuring against different milestones. And this also provides an opportunity for the public and for stakeholders to engage in a conversation about integrity, but also to see what the members are doing. And also it provides a platform for members to showcase their commitments and their progress. And this is, you can see, hopefully in the chat, you can see the link and you can play around and have a look at this dashboard because it was only released this week. So this is a great opportunity to also celebrate this major milestone for us. And the last, I have one, if that's okay, Sander, yeah. One more. Sure. Just my last reflections, and they're very brief, about what are the contributions of Achieve to high integrity climate action with ACAs. I think what we've discussed is that there's a two-way contribution between research and practice, and that's why we're very proud to be members of the consortium of this project, because we see that we have different roles. So for instance, as members of Achieve and the consortium, we see that the value is, of course, to capture and integrate how integrity is understood in different societies, but also to provide accurate, objective, and unbiased guidance for different stakeholder groups, and to ensure that there is more clarity and coherence, because we know that there's different initiatives around the different world, the world that confuse stakeholders, and that it's very difficult for, you know, a company in Mexico or in Vietnam or in South Africa to figure out what initiative they should join and why. And for the ACA, we see that our role in bringing or ensuring voluntary climate action that has integrity is understanding and sharing what this common, a common understanding of this concept, promoting this aspiration among the different stakeholder groups, and amplifying the initiatives or organizations that will comply with such criteria, so that we can motivate our members to join and adhere to such principles, and in that way help to ensure that we're all leading and advancing in the same direction. Thank you very much, Sander.
Thank you very much, Luli, and also for pointing out how Achieve wants to contribute also through understanding what is high integrity in different contexts, and really kind of help strengthen the concept of high integrity climate action. I would like to try again and ask Tom to join. Hi, Tom.
Hi, everyone. Let's see. Hopefully I can make this work now. It's been great listening to our colleagues' presentations. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, great.
We do.
So let me say then a few words about some of the themes we've been discussing. I'm going to focus on the regulatory aspects, which I think we haven't discussed quite as much so far, to add that to the mix. And this discussion comes from a project we are working on here in Oxford on net zero regulation and policy. I'm thinking particularly about the relationship between voluntary action and regulatory action. And as I launch into this, I should say I'm at the moment on parental leave with my young daughter. And so if I stop in the middle of the presentation, it's because I need to go grab her. So bear with me if that occurs. But let's think about this relationship between voluntary non-state climate action and regulation. And if you look at one domain, say the domain of disclosure of climate-related information by companies, you see a really interesting trajectory where in about 25 years ago, this practice started as a voluntary effort by organizations like CDP, one of our colleagues in this project, and over time it became increasingly put into rules and regulations that shape the economy. So voluntary action gave way to some kind of national regulations. The first one was in France in 2016. But of course, during this time, there's also active orchestration by international organizations such as the G20 and the Financial Stability Board, and through standard setting bodies such as the International Foundation on the body behind the International Sustainability Standards Board. And so we have this sort of now set of national rules where governments are requiring companies to disclose information around their climate-related risks and also the often emissions and other details, and across the world. So if you look at these different regulations, there's some kind of mandatory sustainability reporting in jurisdictions that cover something like 2/3 of global GDP. And of course, those are all quite different, and I'll talk a bit more about that. But it's a really interesting example of how one of my work I call a conveyor belt from the voluntary to the mandatory has been spreading out. And I want to just sort of, in that sort of theme, reflect on three key points that I think set the context for how we should think about this increasingly complex combination of voluntary and regulatory governance around climate goals, and particularly I'll focus on the mitigation side on net zero. So the 3 points I want to quickly talk through are: the rise of net zero targets has led to an implementation gap, and therefore an increasing focus on regulation and governance as a potential solution. We're seeing, as I said before, this kind of conveyor belt between the voluntary and the regulatory piece. I want to unpack that a little bit and explain how it works and what it might do. And then as we look toward increasing regulations that shape companies especially, but also other kinds of non-state actors' actions on climate change, the new challenges that come up are also worth our attention as researchers and as practitioners. So the 3 ones to focus on, which I'll mention briefly, are vigor, coherence, and capacity. So let me just offer a few thoughts on these key points. I'll try to keep it very short so we can get to questions. But first, obviously, we've seen a rise of net zero targets by different kinds of actors. So here's some data from the Net Zero Tracker, looking at the number of net zero targets set by countries, that's on the left hand, and companies, that's on the right hand, from 2015, from the signing of the Paris Agreement forward. And what you can see, of course, is that you see a sharp increase and kind of a net zero wave, if you will, around especially COP29, kind of between the period 2020 and 2021, and an increasing, for countries, an increasing shift to put those into rules and laws. And so this is the I think the phenomenon we're all familiar with. But of course, there are a few implementation gaps now. And here's some other information from the Net Zero Tracker showing you the same information in the orange line, the rise of corporate net zero targets as a percentage of annual revenue. So now something like nearly 80% of the Forbes 2000 global list, weighted by annual revenue, has some kind of net zero target. But the robustness of those targets has only gone up slightly during this time period. So the green line, I won't go into the details now, but feel free to ask about it. We can explain more in Q&A. The green line is basically a count of how many features of good practice do these different targets have. So do they include Scope 3 emissions? Do they have interim targets? Do they have a plan? Those kinds of features. As you can see, there's been some increase, but not a huge one. Interestingly, we see a difference between those initiatives that are subject to the orchestration efforts we've seen from the UN and from states. For example, in the Race to Zero campaign. So the blue line is showing you the average quality of the Race to Zero member targets versus non-Race to Zero member targets. And you'll see it is significantly higher, but still, of course, not as high as we'd like it to be. So there's a big implementation gap here in terms of delivering just the features of quality targets, and therefore, a corresponding implementation gap on delivering actual actions and outcomes that are in line with the goals companies are setting. So that's, I think, both the promise and also the difficulty of where this wave of net zero target setting has got us to date. And of course, for countries, we see a very similar policy. This is some information from Carbon Brief, but there's many other versions of this graph. But the key takeaway for me is that we are slowly bending the emissions curve downward. The policies, the blue line here, are slowly beginning to have some bite, and that's, of course, very welcome. But of course, there's a huge gap between the policies, the blue line, and the pledges that countries have made. That's the red line. And of course, there's another gap, an ambition gap between the pledges we've made and the targets we want to reach, such as 1.5 degrees Celsius. But the gap between the policies we have and the pledges, that's in other words, the gap between the blue line and the red line, is actually bigger than the gap between the red line and the yellow line. So if both are important, the ambition gap and the implementation gap, it's actually the implementation gap that's the bigger challenge, I think, and that's fitting for this period of implementation that we're in. So I think that's why this focus on regulation and governance has really emerged as we see the struggles around a voluntary system, both for countries and for companies, plus other actors as well. And I'm sorry, I'm speaking about companies and countries in this context, but it's a similar pattern for cities or for regions as well. And for companies, I think there's a lot of statements we can find from them are pointing toward the failure of countries to adopt appropriate regulatory environments to enable them to take forward their voluntary pledges. So it's not just a question of companies greenwashing or kind of being untrustworthy on their target setting. That's certainly true, it's to some extent, and there are plenty of examples of that, but it's also about building this ambition loop idea, creating a positive feedback loop between the voluntary and the regulatory, and that part is not operating as well as it should be. So net zero governance is, of course, emerging in many different ways. The kind of focus of the Achieve project is, of course, on the private and voluntary side. That's the orange blocks here. But we're seeing lots of efforts by national governments to regulate different kinds of behaviors of non-state actors in ways. And of course, there's international efforts as well. Let me just give you a quick snapshot of some of these economy-wide regulations that are really important for some of the net zero behavior of non-state actors. We did a survey last year of just 4 different domains of regulation. Claims, so basically, do you say you're net zero or not, and you advertise in that way? Disclosure rules, which I spoke about already. Do you disclose information about your climate targets, etc.? Procurement rules, so to what extent governments are conditioning the spending of public resources on climate targets. And then transition planning, which is a set of rules around do companies have to put forward different kinds of plans. And as you see, the count of regulations in those different domains has increased a lot since the Paris Agreement. There's a lot more action taking place, is happening across the world. This is really interesting because it kind of may help to solve some of this implementation gap problem. And so that's the hope of this relationship between voluntary and regulatory. This is I won't speak to all this kind of complex graph, but essentially the idea of this conveyor belt is that if you have strong voluntary initiatives, they're able to forge ahead, experiment, find a frontier of best practice, and then be supported by and enhanced and bigged up by orchestration efforts such as Race to Zero or HLEG or others, that can help to create a sort of normative sense of what best practice looks like. That can then flow into international standards. And we've seen, for example, the ISSB standards, which I mentioned, but also the International Organization for Standardization, ISO, have a net zero framework and is developing a standard now. All of that, of course, can, in theory, create conditions under which it's more likely for domestic regulations to be aligned to this best practice. Now, of course, that's one causal chain, but it's not in any way a guarantee that each of these pieces will flow to the other. However, I think it gives us a bit of a framework for how to direct our efforts and where to look for how and under what conditions these kinds of relationships might apply, because that's going to be a tool for hopefully building stronger regulations that come behind and create a floor under the ceiling that the best voluntary initiatives are pointing toward. So let me just close by mentioning very briefly 3 challenges that this shift to regulation is bringing. And that, as I said before, there are really 3. When you have different regulations, different governments, you get challenges of rigor. Are they actually strong regulations or are they weak regulations? And of course, you have a challenge of coherence. Are they lining up with each other? Is regulation in one jurisdiction aligned to both global international standards, but also what's happening in other jurisdictions? And then a really important one, which I think we don't focus on enough, is the capacity of governments to do this. There's a real challenge there. So I can happily unpack in more detail these different challenges in the further slides, but I might just stop there in the interest of time because I know we're coming to the end of the session and we want to have more time for discussion. So thanks for your attention. Look forward to your comments.
Thank you, Tom, for pointing out the very important relation, of course. I mean, we talk about voluntary climate action, but in the end, we also want to see that link to regulation and also different, also the international context, for instance. So permit me to move on to Takeshi. Sorry, Takeshi. Takeshi Kuramochi is Senior Climate Policy Researcher at New Climate Institute. He is also in the external peer review group of the Race to Zero campaign and member of the scientific advisory group of the Science Based Targets Initiative. Takeshi, New Climate Institute has been very closely monitoring and analyzing corporate climate pledges and voluntary carbon market activities. And just yesterday, I saw on X that New Climate has issued a joint statement with more than 80 civil society organizations rejecting the use of carbon offsets to meet corporate climate targets. So what shortfalls do you see in climate action when it comes to integrity, and what are the key opportunities in supporting higher integrity among voluntary climate action?
Yeah, thank you, Sander, and thank you, everyone. So yes, indeed, New Climate is quite critical about the use of offsets in general. But we have been investigating on the corporate climate targets and their integrity for the last several years, especially after the Glasgow COP in 2021, when there was a wave of net zero targets. And as Tom explained, not all of the net zero targets or the corporate target setting is robust or in line with the Paris Agreement's decarbonization goals. And here you see the screenshot from the net zero stockpick reports. We see that we looked at the Forbes 2000 listed companies and assessed their targets against 4 minimum criteria. So that is to pledge a net zero targets, plan, have an implementation plan, and then have a set of measures to implement and publish a progress reports annually. Just these minimal sort of criteria has not been met by most companies, which is quite striking. And this is about, yeah, thank you. I'll keep it short. And this is about like a big number of companies that we looked at a high level. And if we zoom into certain specific companies. This is findings from the Corporate Climate Responsibility Monitor reports that we've been publishing annually together with Carbon Markets Watch. So here we zoom into like 25 or so global major companies, and they have a lot of issues around transparency of their target setting and implementation plans, and also integrity, which means the robustness and also alignments with the Paris Agreement's 1.5 degree goal. So all in all, we have seen that many of these corporate carbon neutrality claims and so forth are very weak, if not greenwashing. But at least I'm quite positive or more optimistic in the sense that a lot of companies join the effort or the long journey towards a global long-term net zero transition. And I find that quite important. And now we're going into the second stage of this long journey of transition. And what I found it interesting is now many companies acknowledge or understand or forced to acknowledge that net zero is not just about PR stunt or achieving net zero within their own carbon accounting books, but it's about, and also not about using cheap offset credits, but about really contributing to global net zero emissions in a substantive way across their corporate value chain. So companies started understanding that, and we also see evidence of companies really engaging with these rating agencies or institutions like ourselves, really trying to understand what problems they have with their own targets. So I find that as a quite positive development in the past years. And also timing-wise, right now, a lot of voluntary standards being updated, and also many national governments are coming up with regulations, including the EU's Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive and the Due Diligence Directives. So it is really interesting times that we are in running the Achieve project, and there are ample opportunities that we can contribute, not just scientifically, but also to the policymaking process out there. So I see a few opportunities where the Achieve project can make substantial contributions to this enhancing corporate climate action. First is we can now have the opportunity to take stock of where we stand now after 4 or 5 years into target setting and implementation. And we have ample data out there, including the UNFCCC's GCAP, but also Net Zero Tracker database, CDP, Climate Arc, etc. So we can make all the use of these databases to explore trends across headquarter country locations, sectors, alliance memberships on the robust target setting, planning, and implementation, and also to explore the underlying factors for their lagging behind or advancing in terms of progress. And also we can. Another point that we wanted to emphasize is that, not just, if we go into more specifics, make a sector deep dive, we can also learn from individual company cases where the companies get stuck, or where the companies are seeing substantive challenges implementing value chain decarbonization. So it's really right moment to extract those findings and reflect on the future voluntary or mandatory targets or standard setting. So this is really a great opportunity right now. And also one thing important to add on this part is how we can also explore how companies can contribute to enhancing finance flows to the global south, because a lot of multinational companies are operating not just in global north, but also in global south. And one of the contentious issues around offsets and credits is about finance flows to the global south. And there are different views on this, but we believe there are also alternative approaches to enhancing this financial contributions to the global south, other than this sort of voluntary carbon markets. So this is something we also want to explore. Second is to look into the trade-offs and linkages between mitigation and resilience or adaptation measures, because it has been really become urgent to also for companies and also society in general to adapt to aggravating climate change. So this is one area that we will be looking very closely. Third, the last one, I'll keep it short, is to look into the interplay between national climate actions and private sector climate actions. Obviously, all hands on deck approach. We need all actors to, make this very ambitious climate actions and generate ambition loops between national governments and private actors, and therefore they reinforce each other, their climate actions to achieve the Paris Agreement. This is a must. And we need to explore that what is happening on the ground and what needs to happen. So, for example, just taking an example of Japanese car company, it's a large direct emitter, but it's and also electricity consumer. But more importantly, the emissions from their products, that is cars. The companies can have a major impact on the mobility sector transition, not just in Japan, but also in many other countries like Indonesia or Thailand, with the countries that buy these cars of this Japanese company. This means that Japanese companies Japanese government can have an important role to play in the entire road transport sector transition in the region or globally, and also that in this case, Thai or Indonesian governments can also nudge Japanese car companies to provide more cars that are compatible with their national transport sector transitions. And we need to see this kind of interplay and synergy across private sector and the national climate actions. And this is going to become particularly important as governments start really taking seriously the implementation of the long-term net zero plans, and also now that all the countries are formulating 2035 NDCs. So these kind of insights will be very useful for both the corporates and also for the national governments. And I'm looking forward to all the research that will emerge from this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Takeshi, and also great that from all our speakers we get really concrete ideas about like how we as a project, as a chief project, can contribute and strengthen high integrity climate action. So I think the time is now to open the floor for questions and comments. And I'm looking around here in the room. Just put your hand up. And also online, please use the chat function to drop your comments or questions in. And I also invite all speakers, if they are joining us online, to switch their cameras on if you are in a position to do so. Mark.
Hi.
Mark Hofsma.
Mark Hofsma, PBL, Netherlands Environmental Assessment Agency. I especially have a question for the UNFCCC people out there. So in the last, I think especially 2 COP outcomes, especially in the stocktake, there's more and more guidance or triple renewable, double efficiency, move away from fossil fuels. But how does this play out in a more corporate or the non-state actor universe? Do you already see some more, specific? So nowadays we only see emission reduction targets, often scope 1, 2, and 3 are all included. So that is very aggregate, but more specific, detailed actions. Do you already see that happening in the for the non-state actor universe?
No, it's a good point. I think it's where we would like to get to. I mean, that we recognize, I mean, as you know, through our experience with the Global Climate Action Portal, that's really the useful information kind of thing. That's what, I think it goes to some of the points made earlier, that we want to be able to learn from the successes of those who are succeeding, or, help resolve or the challenges or barriers that others are experiencing, where you need to know more than just what their emissions are, more than just what their their scope 1, 2, and 3, as you say, emissions are. You need to know, well, what were they doing or what were they not doing? So yeah, it's certainly an area of definite interest, but I think it's difficult to get into the detail. We do it to some extent, but I think I would agree it's necessary to facilitate kind of really making use of the information and being helpful to non-state actors. So, sorry, Tamer.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I think Ian, as Ian mentioned, but yes, for sure, we believe and we're sure that those actions by non-state actors are already happening. You can see them. Yes, maybe if not the full sample, but you'll see some of them on the Global Climate Action Portal. But perhaps like what we can say in terms of the those GST outcomes with the COP, as you mentioned, those transition away from fossil fuels or double renewable energy, all those 20 calls to 2030 or to the next NDCs. In terms of, for the non-state actor side who's taking action, we think it's going to be rather important to take into account those, this ambition cycle within the CCC, architecture, the Paris Agreement architecture, and, that we quickly mentioned that, so the next round of NDCs is, by, our countries are required to submit by early 2025 next year with the end date of 2035. And, with that in regard, it'll be for, for this, in order for those non-state actors, ambition or action that's been taken, ahead, in order for that to be informed into, each national ambition, that, it's going to be also very important that, they kind of, have a better connection between, the, national ambition process. And of course, where, our portal or, our effort is to kind of like, help them, be recognized to the public in a wider, basis. Again, like using Global Climate Action Portal, but simply speaking, I think this couple of months or into the run-up of 2025, early 2025 is very much an important time frame for those kind of like information to be fed in.
Any more questions? Karstu?
Well, I have a question again to the UNFCCC. You mentioned that there were 85,000 people in Dubai participating in the last COP, and I looked it up a bit, and it's the per capita emission of Dubai is about 25 times that of Nepal, about 2.5 times that of Netherlands, and in such a country where a lot of GDP depends on oil, and bringing 85,000 people in the desert, what's your reflection about organizing such large-scale event in a petro state, and also connecting it to the next COP, which is again going to happen in Azerbaijan, which is a petro state as well?
Thanks for that question too. I think so there are for sure lots of people around the 2 weeks in December in Dubai for sure. First, of course, in terms of kind of procedure and stuff, this the COP is of course run by the rotation amongst all countries, but yes, and also it's very, I think important to keep in mind that how the I would say how those the process management has been done by each not only one of the presidencies or, elsewhere, but, each one by each of the presidencies throughout the years, in terms of rotation and stuff. So, yeah, of course, logically speaking, yes, moving around would, have that stuff, but yeah, at the same time, at least for personally, yes, there was this, important moment of the outcome of the global stock take has been made, and other, subset of agreements has been made to kind of like, operationalize this, Paris Agreement mechanism. Yeah.
I mean, maybe thanks, Tama. I mean, and to add to that, I mean, it's a difficult question, and one that we can't, as Secretariat staff, one we can't really kind of, give you, I'm sure, a satisfactory answer to. And I hope you appreciate that. But maybe thinking a bit about what Luli presented earlier regarding the enhanced engagement in the UEA and the platforms being created there. And so I hopefully would just point to the, the opportunities that, having these COPs in, regions which, do not fit our kind of like, the model maybe, but does come with some opportunity for hopefully increasing ambition and integrity when they talk about climate action. And I think thanks to, the alliances, the networks, the initiatives which are active in those regions. So, yeah, thanks for the question, but yeah, it's a difficult one to answer, as I said.
Thanks for the answer.
Thank you. Any more questions? Otherwise, I still might have one. I see that one of the priorities going into this COP for global climate action is to protect and restore nature. Now, we haven't seen too many indicators, for instance, on GCAP at the moment that would kind of help us understand, to what extent current climate action contributes to nature restoration and protection. Do you plan to, what is your work plan? What does your work plan look like around nature restoration and protection? And I also ask this because one of the things that we are doing in this project is, for instance, we hope to present analysis and also mapping of climate action and possible linkages with other terrains. So for us, this is also a relevant question to understand how we can contribute, even on a short term, on a topic, priority topic like this.
Yeah, thank you, Tama. Sorry. Thank you, Sandor. A good question. I mean, what should we include in GCAP and what shouldn't we include in GCAP? I think part of the work we're doing now is, trying to understand and put together a development plan and a project plan for how the portal will be redeveloped. I think the redevelopment, which we're kind of already starting on the back end, but we will accelerate towards the end of this year and into next year, is partly to make sure that the portal is fit for the implementation of the RAF, and that we're aligned with that, and it supports the RAF, but also recognizing that we're not just focused on net zero pledges. It is the global climate action portal, which is not just mitigation focused, but also encompasses adaptation, resilience, and also other aspects of climate as they become more apparent and more necessary. You mentioned mapping of climate action. I don't know if you're talking about kind of the geographical context there, but I think that's also something that we're looking at, including on GCAP, is having a more kind of geographical approach to information, which is also, aimed at supporting how we are looking at, as well as mitigation, also adaptation and resilience as well. And we have kind of a specific work stream active on that, where we're looking at how to, before we can develop an online tool to be able to showcase it, be able to ensure that we have the data in place that is going to be useful to display. And I suppose the same will go for the nature as well, is trying to understand what are the metrics that you're using and what impact can be shown. So I think that maybe it's interesting you say this is going to be feeding into your analysis. I think that's really good, and I think that'll be useful to us into then kind of learning from you as to how that feeds climate impact. And then hopefully that will be a great input into our redevelopment process.
We hope so too, and we would be very happy to contribute, of course. And we will do these mappings, and it's not only geographic mapping, but it's kind of mapping of trends and roles that we see, changes also in the broad landscape of climate action, and we will do it every year from now on until the end of the project. So in the next 3 to 4 years, we as a project will fully dedicate ourselves to make an impact through research and through hopefully also through evidence-based contributions to your work and more generally to strengthen high integrity climate action. We hope to do it with all partners, of course, but also all stakeholders, including yourselves at UNFCCC every step of the way. And we will show a slide now where you can learn more about our project, because we do have a website and we do have social media where you can follow us, where you can also find more information and also more about upcoming events in due time. I would like to thank you all for participating in this open session on high integrity voluntary climate action. And I would particularly like to thank our excellent speakers and guests, Ian, Tama, Tom, I think Tom already left, Luli, Takeshi. Thank you very much for joining our discussion on promoting voluntary climate action, which is something that we hope to do with all of you. For those participating online in the Achieve project meeting in next today and tomorrow, please rejoin us at 2:30 Central European Summertime using the Teams link that my colleague Kausup Tapa has shared with you. Thank you very much there in Bonn, Mexico.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Sander. Thanks, everyone.